Hello and welcome to Internet Capital Markets, the weekly show where we explore how financial systems are being rebuilt on the web. Each week, we sit down with the builders, investors, and institutional leaders who are shaping this transformation, from tokenized assets, decentralized finance, and not to forget, security. I'm Jeremy Pazetio, and with my co-host and co-founder Jonas Zoman, we are builders ourselves. Today's show is brought to you by Trust Bytes, smart treasury for internet capital markets. Today, we are joined by a true heavyweight in the world of digital security. With over 15 years focused on computer security and more than 7 of those in the high stakes of the Web3 space. Our guest has the resume to back up the hype. He holds a PhD in computer science from TU Munich, boasts over 1,200 citations on Google Scholar, and has a history with industry giants like Deloitte, Philips, and BMW. His journey took him from a childhood math prodigy to pioneering Web3 security, where he completed over 100 audits and even founded the world's first regulated insurance company for smart contract hacks. Now, as the head of his own firm, Adevar Labs, he's here to talk about the latest Web3 threats and solutions. Welcome, Sebastian. Great to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure.
All right. In traditional finance, trust is institutional. In internet capital markets, trust must be programmatic. How do you define security in a world where code replaces counterparties?
That's quite an interesting question because we need to think about, like you said, if code becomes the new counterparty, then probably code correctness is that new trust, right? Or
Mhm,
even economic security, because you don't want to get hacked, right? So you
mhm,
want those assets to stay in the smart contracts. That should be correct from like a code perspective if we go along the ethos of code is law. And
mhm,
then I guess the new institutions are the protocols themselves that deploy these contracts and hold the funds. So that's how I would define all of these things in terms of the new different entities: counterparty, trust, and institutions.
mm. All right. A new definition for institutions. Oh, okay. Let's go on. So we often talk about scalability, composability, or liquidity. But if you think about it, security rarely gets the spotlight until something really breaks. It's like going to the dentist, only when it hurts. Should security be treated as the primary design layer in blockchain rather than be audited after it happens or after the build?
I think definitely security is often um, underestimated. There's of course this trilemma of any software problem, or even there's this trilemma of decentralization, where if you put it on a triangle, if you put, you would have security on one of the edges, or one of the ends, and then you would have scalability, and then either decentralization or costs, right? You can't have them
Mm,
all. You need to have trade-offs.
mm,
um, but at the same time, having security at the foundational design layer is not something that we need to invent right now, because it's been already invented and pioneered
mm,
for decades. Like the first
mm,
time I think security by design was coined was somewhere around 2004 by Microsoft, which
mm,
created this secure development lifecycle (SDL), and they were, you know, suggesting to use all sorts of design principles, secure design principles that had been proposed even in as early as the 70s, right? You need,
mm,
when you start doing something, you need to do threat modeling and risk assessment. When you build something, you need to have proper access control and use the
mm,
principle of least privilege. You need to have a security architecture, that
mm,
has the latest and greatest cryptographic primitives that haven't been broken by side channel attacks or some kind of cryptanalysis, and so on. Like those kind of things are all things that should be done, I think, at the design stage. But in Web3, people always, want to focus on getting something off the ground from a business
mm.
perspective. And once they see this is successful, then they start to think about security. But oftentimes that might be too late because they might already be
Yeah.
subject to.
So it's about thinking of the basics as early as possible. And as you say, they are not new. You mentioned the trilemma. And yeah, now we see kind of a big shift. Internet capital markets are merging with institutional capital markets,
Yeah.
and the meaning of trust actually changes. And while capital markets are built on open permissionless networks, like how does the meaning of trust actually change if you look at, for example, Solana or Ethereum?
Yeah, I mean, like, even if you look at blockchains in general, as opposed to traditional finance, in traditional finance, I think trust is defined in more social terms and legal constructs, where you have like things like human judgment that come into play. And of course, there's a lot of human error involved and ethical concerns, and so on, right? When you talk about trust at this kind of social level. And if you switch to something like Web3 and DeFi, trust basically shifts to a more mathematical
Mm,
and technological level, where you're no longer trusting humans, but you're trusting the code. You're, like there's this. I already mentioned it, I think, before. Code is law. This sort of like ethos in Web3, where you don't need to trust humans. You can see the code, you can analyze the code, and if the code does what you want it to do, then it's good, right? And I think like there's often, in this space, there's something which I don't particularly like, but we often call these systems trustless, right?
yeah.
But it basically means that you don't need to trust a third party, or a human, right? um, I think you still, like, you have this I think like it's a paradox of trustlessness, right? Where
Mm,
you're just shifting the trust to different things, right? You're no longer trusting the human to do their job, and not, like, steal funds from a bank vault or whatever.
mm,
But you still need to trust, first of all, the developer, that they've written code which is proper and implements the functional specifications. You need to trust the auditors, that they've also done their jobs impartially and have, verified that the code matches the specifications
mm,
set up by the developer. But then you also need to trust the governing mechanism. Like, if there's a DAO behind a certain project, it might also be corrupted, right? And last but not least, you need to trust the data, right? The external data coming into the blockchain, and which is used by your protocol, or by the protocol where you're depositing funds. And that external data often comes from oracles, right? And those oracles could also be compromised. So I feel like, the word trustless or trustlessness is a bit overused.
Yeah, so if we are zooming out now a bit and shifting gears a little bit and talking more about like your day-to-day job, and like if we compare like traditional IT cybersecurity and blockchain cybersecurity, like what are like the additional cybersecurity risks here that come on top of all of the traditional IT cybersecurity from your perspective?
Yeah, that's a great question, and there are quite a few of those. First of all, like if we're talking about blockchains overall, there are things which come at the network level itself, which could be like consensus level attacks. Um, I think back a few years back when there were several blockchains using proof of work, we had this fear that some malicious attacker could gain access to enough hashing power to perform a 51% attack on some of the networks. And I think like at some point, I don't remember if it was something like Bitcoin Cash or some smaller network, that where we saw these kind of attacks happen.
Mm,
Um, but that is very different from something like a denial of service or distributed denial of service attack in traditional IT security. Also, we have the on-chain part, which are the smart contracts running on the blockchain itself, and there, you have new classes of vulnerabilities such as reentrancy attacks, which we didn't see in traditional IT, but we also see vulnerabilities which have been present in traditional IT for many years. There's definitely a lot more, uh, I guess, care and focus on private key management in the blockchain space, but that was also something that traditional IT was doing already. Whenever there was like a PKI in a traditional IT company, that was given huge amount of interest. One thing which is a bit different also from traditional IT are all of these, like now we have multiple blockchains and we have cross-chain bridges, and those
mm,
have a bit of an on-chain part and a bit of an off-chain part, and many times attackers will try to exploit either the on-chain off-chain part or a combination in order to steal funds from the system.
And I feel like especially recently, a lot of like projects just forget that there's like also this traditional IT cybersecurity part, right? I do believe like if we are like looking back, especially in the last year, we saw like a lot of like attack vectors, especially when we are talking about social engineering, that were actually like always there, but now they became so imminent, so that like there were huge hacks ongoing, simply because like yeah, private keys got stolen, but this is like not actually like a cybersecurity risk, like particularly from blockchains or evolving from blockchains. Um, when we now look more into like your day-to-day job now and the job of Adevar Labs, and that you are focusing here specifically on Solana, um, like what are the differences of like Solana compared like to other blockchains? And then also a second part of the question, why did you decide to go with Solana here?
Well, I guess like there's a lot to unpack there, but I discovered Solana relatively late, compared to many of the other people in this space, and the just the sheer performance in terms of like throughput, that it can do, and parallelism, um, are quite a big difference when it comes to thinking about um, how to design the applications and their security. There's a bit of a language difference because Solana uses Rust, as opposed to Solidity on EVM or Move on Sui. But we chose to start with Solana because we thought we thought this space is growing tremendously, and there are now not sufficient auditing firms that can offer quality audits for this particular blockchain. So we saw that there was a growing demand and not sufficient supply. Now, this was, a year ago. Things might have changed now. And one thing I wanted to say is that even though we focus on Solana and most of the work that we do is on Solana, we also serve other ecosystems. We believe that whenever someone is underserved, we can jump in to help, because the most subtle and tricky bugs, they often are hidden in the business logic, and they're not necessarily something very specific to the chain or the language itself. If there's something really specific to the chain or language, those things can oftentimes be automated and detected by tools. But the most subtle business logic specific bugs, they require an understanding of how a protocol works. And then you're able to detect those kind of vulnerabilities. And it's much harder to automate.
I feel like, especially like in the beginning, and I do see like that the industry is changing there, that like more and more security firms are also focusing on the business logic of contracts. So luckily that is changing. But like from your perspective and from your experience, like what would be like the ideal security stack for like a project or protocol, for example, building on Solana? What are the one-time measures, like security reviews, and what are like ongoing security measures that always should be in place so that you really can be confident, yeah, at least like I have done everything that I could in order to ensure like funds in the protocol?
Mm-hmm. No, that's a really good question, and I feel like that's where we need more maturity in the Web3 space. I think my answer doesn't differ that much from one blockchain to another, but I see that you would need something like 3 important layers for this kind of ideal security stack. One, I think or maybe even 2, you already alluded to. One is code security, and I honestly don't think that just having one review of the code before the launch is sufficient. I think there needs to be way more embedding of this kind of security process, and should be done iteratively leading up to the launch. So you could even have like some kind of continuous security reviews, or even like tools scanning your code while you're developing. Also, we know that protocols, once they deploy, they typically add new features, and they keep on developing new features and deploying them. So that there's a continuous need for reviews there. Of course, you also mentioned something like monitoring, right? You would need real time on chain, maybe also off chain monitoring that would allow you to detect any kind of threats and be able to respond to an incident. You also need to set up this kind of plan. What do you do in case of different incidents, and to be able to do proper forensics. And the thing that I would also add there is, of course, to have proper operational security, because I think in the previous question you mentioned there's a lot of work that is done for security on chain, and like very advanced cryptographic stuff, but then we're seeing a lot of hacks where the humans in the loop are being hacked, and that has to do with operational security. So doing proper key management such that someone cannot just be social engineered into handing over or getting the key stolen from whatever password manager they're using on their computer, and that key has access to the whole protocol as a super admin. You have to have proper access control. You need to split the roles into different access privileges. Not that there's like one role that has access to everything, but maybe make it more fine grained such that if one of those roles is compromised, it wouldn't just bring down everything.
That makes total sense, and actually perfectly fits into my next question. Like, what are like the most common and maybe also most dangerous attack vectors here? You already mentioned like a re-entrancy attack. I think especially when we're talking about like this re-entrancy attack, I think this was like a problem, if I'm not mistaken, like especially in the beginning. But nowadays, I think like everybody's like fully aware like how these attacks work, and this could be like prevented like quite easily.
Yeah.
Then also, I mean, probably like that differs a lot from protocol to protocol. But do you think, like, from a security perspective, is the industry already ready for really institutional adoption? So we see that the big financial institutions coming in, but like from a security perspective, are they even ready for that?
Yeah, I guess like there were two questions there. Like the first question you mentioned, maybe I misunderstood, but was like, what are the most common attack vectors, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. I think in terms of the most common attack vectors, you mentioned reentrancy, and that is, yeah, I guess like the attack vector is that smart contracts have flaws, right? There's like either logic flaws or even like language specific or blockchain specific flaws that get exploited. And I think that is sort of like a constant threat and a pretty high level of danger. And it could happen to any DeFi protocol or any protocol deployed on chain. You also have other attack vectors which have to do with data manipulation. I think we touched on that a bit earlier. If a price oracle is manipulated, it could lead to huge financial losses due to the existence of things like flash loans. So I think the danger there could be even higher because it just leads to such a tremendous financial impact, right? And the targets there are typically lending protocols, dexes, and so on, right? There's also a different attack vector that has to do with just cross-chain communication, right? So you have like bridges or things that allow different blockchains to communicate with each other, and in those cases you would exploit maybe a combination of on-chain and off-chain stuff. And yeah, last but not least, an attack vector is of course like the governance layer, right? If you have like governance built into a protocol where the governance token holders can vote on proposals and everyone can propose something new, you have the possibility of a malicious attacker proposing something malicious or voting and then voting on it, and it gets passed, and then bad things happen. And then, sorry, the other part of your question was, are traditional institutions ready, right? Or is
Yeah.
DeFi,
So yeah. So
uh,
like from your experience, I mean, like the security requirements, like for institutional level, is like another game here, right? So, question was like, do you think we are already ready so that like financial institutions can even engage? I mean, we see that, but like, is that like responsible from their perspective to do that, or like what needs to change before?
Yeah, I think like one big thing that like this just like this fundamental, or not fundamental, but like huge difference between traditional finance and Web3 or DeFi is the existence of recourse, right? Like in Web3, if someone's able to transfer the funds or you've sent the funds to the wrong address, there's no recourse. Those are gone. I have heard about people trying to build something that would allow recourse, but of course they get a lot of pushback because it means like, oh, it's just centralized. They're now just it's same as traditional banks, right? But that's a huge difference, right? When you can do recourse, I think that is something that is really necessary for traditional finance to happen. And I think this also relates to, the code is law versus law is law. I think this is the big difference there. In addition to that, there's a bunch of other things which I think are still problematic with Web3 and DeFi, and that has to do with like the pseudonymity, that is built into the blockchain, where you don't necessarily need to have KYC. You can't impose sanctions because there's like unrestricted fund flows cross border. Those are some difficult things that I think Web3 needs to overcome in one way or the other, in order for TradFi to fully onboard, right? Yeah, I guess in addition to that, there's more sort of like technical things that could probably be overcome with a bit more um, innovation, and that has to do with the fact that in traditional finance we have like really robust security operations, where you have like these physical circuit breakers where you can pull the plug if something bad happens. In Web3, you can't really pull the plug on a blockchain if something bad happens, or on a protocol. Well, there's like built-in pausing mechanisms and so on, but it's a bit different beast, right? Yeah, I guess like those are the main differences that I see as blockers for TradFi to fully onboard into Web3 right now.
These are big things. And also nowadays, everyone is talking about AI and the agentic web as we move towards more autonomous finance and the AI agents and executing things. What new risks do you foresee? And on the other hand, could AI in a way play a meaningful role in proactive defense? What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of new risk that I see coming, because you're basically combining this black box of AI, right, with all of the problems that we've discussed before.
It's an amplifier.
It's an amplifier, definitely. So yeah, I mean, of course, we all know there could be these kind of attacks where agents could coordinate with each other if they control wallets in order to drive prices up, in a similar to like a pumping scheme, and if they're able to communicate with each other, that would be not necessarily even understandable by humans, right? They could find ways of communicating that are not legible to us. So those are the kind of things that could happen if the agents collude. Now, if they don't collude, there still could be things that could go wrong if someone is able to poison, sort of like a prompt poisoning attack to such an agent. But it wouldn't come from like your typical, chat GPT prompt, but it would come from maybe, tweets or whatever that agent is reading, emails, tweets, news articles, whatever, you could poison those data sources, and it could lead the agent to believe that some kind of trade is very good when it's definitely not, or yeah, something like that. Those kind of things, I think, are typically called data poisoning attacks. There's also like, I think, another problem where once you build these agents, if someone builds them and they start selling them, and they do damage, like, will those companies that built the agents, will those companies be liable for all the financial damage? Like, who's going to cover the financial damage done by such agents? I think this is similar to what we're discussing about autonomous cars, right? If an autonomous car causes an accident, what how does insurance cover that, right? Especially because it would happen at scale. There would be many such agents maybe doing unethical things, or whatever, something which is causing a loss, right? And then, of course, you have like your typical AI agent biases. There have been several cases of that where there's a certain bias built into AI models that all the companies are trying to get rid of. I'm not exactly sure how that would affect Web3, but yeah, I could see maybe some projects getting less attention due to this kind of bias. Not due to the fact that they're not advanced, or like proper projects. I'm not sure if I answered all your questions there. Maybe there were like two questions.
Yeah, this topic alone, we could do just one episode. You could have an army of agents, they don't have an identity, nobody takes liability, and so on.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's come to some fun time. Let's do a quick fire.
Wow.
I will shoot a few questions at you, and you have one word each to answer them.
Ooh.
So, ready?
Yes.
Let's go. The most underestimated risk in Web3 security today?
Supply chain risk.
The most overhyped security buzzword?
I think I mentioned it a couple of times. I would say trustless.
One word. Yeah. A recent exploit everyone should learn from.
A recent exploit everyone should learn from. Oh man, I don't want to name names, to be honest. Just take a look at a bunch of bridge hacks. I think those are super interesting. There's so many things to exploit. So bridge hacks.
Okay. A single word that describes the future of finance.
Complicated. Autonomous.
Okay. A book or thinker who most influenced how you see finance.
There was this book that I read.
One word.
Oh, I'll give a name. MJ DeMarco.
Ah, good one. A misconception about crypto or DeFi you wish would disappear.
I cannot say trustless again. I'll say anonymity. anonymity.
Okay, what would you build if regulation of funding were no constraint at all?
A citadel.
One sentence, what will secure finance look like in 2030?
There's no such thing as 100% secure, so I guess yeah, I don't know. Yeah. Ooh. So you can find me on X under Banescu Sebi, written together, or at Adevar Labs, written together. And we're also present on LinkedIn. Those are the two social network, social media networks that we use. And then who should you talk to next? I would really like to see an episode where you bring on Satoshi Nakamoto. But if you can't find him, I'll settle for the next best things. You could find someone building one of the leading blockchains, and you guys are really into Solana, so would be cool to have Toli on the next episode.
That would be a great guest indeed. But we try our luck with Satoshi. So that wraps up this week's episode of Internet Capital Markets. A huge thank you to you, Sebastian, for joining us today and sharing your insights on actually one of the largest pillars of it, which is security. So if you need security out there, you know how to find Sebastian. And if you enjoyed today's discussion, make sure to subscribe, rate, and share the show. It helps us to bring more conversations with the people shaping the future of on-chain finance. And this is Internet Capital Markets. Join us next week as we continue exploring how technology, capital, and human creativity converge to build the financial systems of tomorrow. Until then, stay curious, stay connected, and keep building the future of finance. Bye.
Hey, are you guys still there?